Don't wait till the battle's over. Don't wait till the struggle ends. Shout now, right now. Shout now. Don't wait till you make it.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Phillip Show. Today is all about theater. Today is all about the arts. Today is about how do you grow and who do you become and what do you do when you're artistically inclined. How important are the arts to us? You know, throughout the United States, we hear a lot of people really advocating for the arts in schools not to die down. But what about when you're younger? How does it get you to where you are in life as an adult? You know, I live in Yellow Springs, and Yellow Springs is a very artistic town. So to join us, we have a lot of artsy people. We're going to be talking about the YS Kids Playhouse today, and I'm so thrilled to have a guest that is just full. Look at all these people coming on here. Hey everyone, I have John Fleming, the director of YS Kids Playhouse. John, before we do all of the introductions, I want to say hello to you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really good, and I had a wonderful class, acting class. I'm feeling upbeat from that, and it's so great to see people.
Yeah. Well, you know, that sounds a lot different now coming out of COVID. It is very great to see people. You know, it didn't mean the same like 3 years ago. Now we can say it is very good to see people. And I see a few people here on the screen. John, I'm going to let you introduce these dynamic artists that we have here.
Roger Beal is a longtime board member and treasurer of the YSKP, but he also had a son in the very first show, Dick Tracy, the musical, and a daughter, Ara Beal, in the second show. And then Ara went on to become an artistic director for 3 years of the company. Zeno Dewey is a longtime member. I'm talking about people as if they're kids, but actually they're adults, right? So
Yeah.
Zena Dewey did some shows. She'll tell you how many, as growing up here in Yellow Springs, and she's currently the coordinator for our October 1st gala.
Wonderful.
Wyndham Meiser started doing shows when he was a youngster as well, and also went on to get a degree in theater at Columbia College in Chicago.
Wow, I feel so very unaccomplished over here, sitting listening. So so it's wonderful that we're all a part of it, but I want to take just a minute for the people who, even in Yellow Springs, you know, you can live here and still not know that there are amazing things going on here. What is the YS Kids Playhouse? What is it? I'm gonna let anybody answer that one.
You want to head it, John?
It's a theater for youth, and it began in 1996. And it had, and it in particular did original theater. So there are some wonderful earmarks of the YSKP, that being one. So none of the shows were ever done before. Some of them were adapted from like James Bond movies or the Jane Austen show, Sense and Sensibility. But we didn't do any scripts that were already written. So the people who were in that show, as Zeno and Wyndham can say, they had to figure out who the character was at that moment. And they had to present that character for the world also at that moment. And I think, don't hesitate to say that one of the earmarks also of the YSKP was that we treated children and youth as people, not necessarily as children.
Wow, treating the youth as people. Zeno, I'm going to ask you, coming through and being a part of the YS Kids Playhouse, what did that mean to you as a young person?
You know, I have to say that in the beginning, I started when I was 12, and it was a really big reach for me to start doing theater. I remember it being really scary in the beginning, just because I was little, you know, and I didn't really, you know, when you're young, you just don't really know what's going on at all times.
Right.
But it gave me an opportunity to, you know, have responsibility, to learn just how to be on stage, to present myself, to be out in public in a way. It for me, doing this theater as a kid, it gave me a lot of opportunities to be outgoing in a way that I hadn't had access to before, as well as just learning how to present myself in front of people. But beyond that, in Yellow Springs Kids Playhouse specifically, there was kind of a system of caretaking or mentorship between the older students or kids and the younger kids. So, I remember being, kind of wrangled by the older kids when I was young. And then as I got older, I aged up into being the wrangler or the mentor, the teacher. So there's like a lot of responsibility that was held amongst the kids. So it was a really cool experience for like just so many ways of growth.
Yeah, I can imagine when being young and then all of a sudden being a part of something that's so artistic, giving you the confidence to stand in front of people. Wyndham, you're in Chicago, right? Well, you were in Chicago.
I went to school in Chicago. I was, yes, no, but like comparing Chicago to this, I think YSKP was really the greatest opportunity to do, like what John said, like just original content that. So like every time I went through a performance, like I could say like, oh, I was the first one to do that. Like that was fun. And I can have that like in my list of things. And I would put that stuff like in Chicago, like on my resume. And like a lot of people would ask like, oh, what is this? And I was like, oh, it's the first of its kind. Like this was the one thing this is like the one of its kind play. And sometimes, and it was just because everyone else has like stuff that's been done like 10 years on over. So it was kind of fun to have that stuff on my list to show people, to show that I had done it. And so, yeah.
Part of the originality is that even though it was coming from this very small little village in Yellow Springs, the shows had big ideas that were almost like contemporary cultural ideas. It could be the idea of celebrity. There was a show that was the idea of branding, but in a consumer way, consumer branding. There were ecological themes. So always worked with writers who wrote the shows and great writers who wrote the shows and were able to incorporate these, we were able to incorporate these big ideas. It usually took a year to write a show from the beginning. This is the idea of this show until when it was first done.
Roger, with working with everybody and what you do now, what have you seen when it comes to the progress or the way that the YS Kids Playhouse has grown? What have you seen there?
Oh, well, it's, you kind of have to go back to, as John was saying, the kids had to, since it was a new play and they couldn't go to YouTube, rent a DVD or a VCR back then and watch that movie to see what the character did. They had to develop it in their head themselves. And then I would watch all those different kids with their new characters, then try to develop playing off all the other new characters and come along and create the end piece. My one example is my son went through a lot of years of YSKP, and John had the next show, and John called my son up and said, well, you're going to be Hades this year in this production. Andrew looked at me and said, well, who is Hades and what am I supposed to do? And I said, well, do the research and you develop it from there. And it was really, the whole content was Hades was going to be a info commercial salesman promoting Hades and all that stuff. But Andrew really had to learn mythology as well. Who are these characters and what are they supposed to be doing? So it really ends up being the kids, as I've seen all the way along, as John was saying, they work with the director. All the music's always original. So even the composers doing the music might switch the key in a song to fit that actual kid that's doing the song or a group of songs. Then the artistic directors, costumers, set design, everything. So the kids were really exposed to all the arts, not just standing up on stage, and kind of picking up on what Zena said is my kids that went through YSKP, even when they're in high school, the teacher said, well, you can do a report or a presentation. They always did the presentation because that's what they were used to doing. They didn't sweat that at all.
John, you had mentioned that you had a lot of writers. How did you decide on what either play, or how did you decide on the repertoire, I guess, if you will? And if it's all new, how would you say, yes, this is one, or I don't think that's a good fit?
It was actually a little bit spontaneous because I know that when a longtime participant, Matthew Zaremski, kind of came up to me and said, can we do Robin Hood? And so I decided to do Robin Hood, but set it in Cajun country in Southwest Louisiana.
Oh, wow.
And there were merry men and, merry men and women. And so it had a kind of, the music had the flavor of Cajun music. And it was about being wet all the time in the swamps. And it was about people who lived the land. And it was also about the encroachment of the fresh salt water of the Gulf of Mexico encroaching on the freshwater southwestern Louisiana. We did not know that at the time, but that's actually happening now. And so it has ecological kind of a big idea that actually, unfortunately, has turned out to be somewhat true. But all of that is housed in the Robin Hood story. It was called Gaston Boudreaux, the Cajun Robin Hood.
Now, did you ever come to a point where you're just kind of like, we have this script. You said it took a year to write one. Did you ever get done with it in that year and just like, no, what else you got? What's another idea?
Yes, of course. I mean, like, what is, what's coming, what's coming next? And, there are just great kids here who want to do stuff. And also, people that I know, writers that I knew who could go to and say, Peggy Pettit is an African-American performance artist. And we did a show about called Follow the, Guided by a Star, which is about follow the drinking gourd based on that song that kids learn. And she happened to be in a residency in Ghana. And she actually sent a picture. And it's like, this is where I'm staying. This is the cafe. It had a straw roof, so I was able to, just share that with the kids who were doing it. And she had a lot of insight into that play.
I know that a lot of times, as I started the show, funding for the arts is always something that is, of course, being pushed, but needed. The reason why it's pushed so much is because it's needed. Wyndham, I want to ask you, being in Chicago, seeing art on a different level, in retrospect to say here in Yellow Springs, or a smaller town, how important, if at all, is it to have a big budget?
It's important. Sometimes it isn't really about like the size of the budget. It's you have to have people that know how to handle money. So you can have a big budget. Okay, well, so you can have a big budget, and that offers more flexibility in your performance. Yeah. But I've seen big budget stuff in Chicago that I kind of was like, why'd you do that? Like, why'd you make those choices? But then others, obviously, I was like, hey, that was a really good use of your resources, and it was a really good show. And maybe if I looked at the price tag on each one, it would look a lot different than what I would imagine. So, like, good doesn't necessarily mean you've thrown more money at it. Good probably means you just dealt with that money better. And I feel like, I mean, in YSKP, like, I think we it just kind of came down to, we just kind of dealt with money more consciously, because we knew that it's not that we didn't ever have like none. It's just we knew that, like, okay, this is the amount for this year. This is what we can use. So and a lot of it kind of came down to, like, we would just do art projects that would just become part of the show. Like we would do like masks ourselves. We did a lot of like some like even like whole like just set pieces ourselves. I know for like especially one the last one I did, Superhuman Happiness, there was a lot of like, okay, we're making like our own set pieces, and so each kid had their own. They can show off like the art that they did just by having it just on stage with them. So that's kind of the cool stuff that would happen from that.
I would like to piggyback on that, which is true, and thank you for bringing that up, Wyndham. But I would also point out that the YSKP is a community theater that always paid the artists, well, musicians, set designers, costumiers. So as Wyndham pointed out, it's not necessarily big budget, but there was a point of paying people and the writers as well.
And just a little addition to that, which is really beautiful, is just, you know, as a child experiencing, Roger kind of touched on this, but having so many different touch points with art in different forms, like with the costuming, with the set design, you know, with the music director, we got to work one-on-one with many different artists, and a lot of them were local artists. So it was really like a community event yearly, where many different people in the community came together to make it happen.
There are 3 artists that the YSKP would not even know how to describe what it would be, and that is Miguel Oromo, who was a longtime set designer, and Tucky Bailey, who is a longtime composer, and Brian Springer, who is not long time, but he entered YSKP at a very significant time when we became multimedia. So he is a videographer that brought us to that level. For instance, in Sense and Sensibility, which is based on the Jane Austen novel, I did receive a grant to go to Chile, and I interviewed young people in Chile about what are the protocols of dating in Chile. And so dating, like, how does it work in Chile? And videotaped them, and then we presented it in the amphitheater, and Chilean young people shared their thoughts with Yellow Springs young people, interacted with them, although one were in video only. So we incorporated media in that show, and Brian Springer in particular was the kind of technical genius behind all of that.
Roger, for you with YS Kids Playhouse being here for so long, how do you feel that it has impacted this community in particular, but that type of theater just in general in communities?
Well, it basically exposed kids in a small town to all these types of artists that they would have never been exposed to. I mean, and Wyndham can attest to that. Everybody does the high school play. Well, that's about it, you know. You do the high school play, and maybe a grade school play, and that's your exposure to the arts. With YSKP, I know when my son was applying to colleges, the admissions officer will say, well, how many plays have you done? And he would look at him and say, oh, I think it's about 16 now, you know, rather than 3. So what it's done is, again, as everybody else was talking about, it's really a sense of community, everybody be involved. You know, every year we see the same audience members, you know, everybody in town comes out. So does that answer your question, Phillip?
No, it definitely does. I mean, I love it because it kind of gives an overarching perspective of how it can impact in this community. How can we be involved more?
Mm-hmm.
For people looking and people wondering, it's like, maybe I'm not an actor, you know, maybe I'm not, I don't know. How could I be involved more, I guess, to experience more?
Mm-hmm.
Well, also the story of the YSKP is also the story of our association with the college. And we were kind of a resident company there and did performances in the amphitheater and also in the Foundry Theater, but we weren't the only ones. Community Dance, Valerie Blackwell Truitt's company, did shows annually, and there were films going on. So a lot of that has diminished over the years. So that location was kind of a heartbeat for, it's kind of like if you have a meeting downtown, you go to the Emporium, and it's like a heartbeat for people in community, having community type meetings. And the Foundry Theater, which was called the Antioch Area Theater then, was kind of like a location. So the diminishment of that location because of certain things that happened at the college and also COVID, kind of was a blow that I think we're coming out of now. And I hope we are.
And while John was talking, I came up with maybe a couple more specific responses that I would love to see like a youth choir. I think I totally would have joined like a youth choir in town. I'm sure there are things that are around that I'm not aware of because I am not a child and do not have a child. But I think, dance lessons. I remember getting to take a couple dance lessons as a kid, and getting to dance in YSKP was a really big, awesome experience. So having... I'm a designer. I'm a professional designer, a graphic designer, and I would love to see, honestly, like more digitally oriented courses for kids, or just workshops. I think, they could be like week-long workshops, little summer camps, things like that kids can get involved in and like learn, get their fingers basically into just different media, different forms of the arts.
A few years ago, I became kind of like very interested and slightly obsessed with complaint choirs. And different towns in Europe and the Americas have a complaint choir in which they complain. The choir complains about, various things, including, and the beer's too warm. I mean, that's a pretty good. If that's what your complaint is, that's not so bad where you're living. That was in Scandinavia, but that would, those kind of things would be fun to have.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real choir?
Yeah.
That's fun. I don't know. Yeah. I think you can just get on our discussion group for that.
Unfortunately, I can't sing.
Oh my goodness. So I know that there's an event coming up. John, tell us about the event that's coming up in October.
The Kids Playhouse is dissolving at the end of 2022, and our archives are going to be deposited at the Yellow Springs, Greene County Public Library Reading Room. And I'm in the process of collecting those, and they're going to be on kind of permanent deposit there. And then part of the also ongoing legacy will be a scholarship, a YSKP legacy scholarship that geared towards Yellow Springs high school students, but not exclusively to kids who've done plays, but to kids who are interested in pursuing innovation in whatever field they pursue in college. So on October 1st is, number one, a celebration of YSKP's history and community here, and number two, also a fundraiser for the Legacy Scholarship. There's no entrance fee or anything like that, but when people are there, they can make a contribution to the Legacy Scholarship. And hoping to have some special guests in addition to the two special people who are here today, and also musicians who played in past shows, maybe with jam sessions. So it's a celebration.
Well, that's wonderful. And you said that's on October the 1st.
October the 1st at 7:00 in the Foundry Theater.
In the Foundry Theater. And for those of you at home, you're going to have that information too. So as we close, I like to go around the screen or the room, and I want each of you to give me one reason why someone should support the arts. One reason as to why someone should support the arts. Wyndham, I'm going to start with you.
Because if you want to see something, you need to do something.
Oh.
Whoa.
I need a microphone.
Well, it's true. Like if there's something you want to see, there's probably something you need to do first. So
If you want to see something, you got to do something. Roger.
Oh man, how can I follow up on that? Gee whiz. Give me the question one more time, Phillip.
Give us one reason why someone should support the arts.
Because without the arts, we're not human. I mean, to be human is to create things, and the arts is creation. I mean, you can be a writer, musician, a builder, a craftsman. It's all the arts. So, that is my take on it.
That's
The arts, to be human is to do the arts, and the arts is to be human.
That's a good one. That's another tough one. Zena, that's a tough one. What you got?
The arts are incredibly enriching, for kids, for adults, to create in the arts, is very soulful. It's an act of expression, an act of, self-discovery as well. And also it's beautiful to witness the arts, right? To attend a show, to listen to a band play. It's so much more than just an individual's experience. It's often a community experience. And there's just so much to be expressed in the world that the arts can, actually express.
That's great. That is great. And John, take us home.
I want to follow up with what Roger said about the arts being reflecting humanity. And if you go to a museum, it shows how human behavior was, how humans thought of themselves at the time that the art was made. In terms of contemporary art, which the YSKP did, it was a reflection, it's a mirror of who we are at that time. So arts are kind of like a bell that rings out about who are we, and what are the stories we tell at that moment about who we are.
Wow, who are we and what are the stories we tell? Wyndham, Roger, Zena, John, thank you so much for being here and inspiring us just through explaining this organization. Wow, I know so many people have seen it, kind of been a part of it, but to hear your testimonies about it is truly inspiring. So thank you for being here.